Ah, my good and dear friends. This is Londo Molare, and I'm watching the Bad News Bards. By the way, I hear the Psy Corps is looking for you. I would hate very much if they found you.
Well, hello, Cam.
Good evening.
How are we doing this evening?
Super.
So I see a magic number there showed up.
What kind of magic number?
Well, it says that we hit 300 subs.
300 subs. Congratulations.
Yeah, 200 more to go, man. Tell your friends. Oh, look, Bloodworth is here. Hey, Rich, how you doing? And Chris Moneymaker, I see a whole bunch of names I know out there. Robert, Uh, yeah, we've got a few people in the chat. A lot of our friends and potential guests are away at cons. EggCon, of course, was going on. EggCon 3 was going on up in Lake Geneva this weekend. So a lot of buddies we know are at that event. VentureCon was another one. So we've got friends that were there. Man, I'm missing out. I'm already itching to go to another con. But we've got Dean here. He's going to co-host this with us, and hey, we got Dying Breed in the chat, so he's going to tell us all about how we're wrong. So let me go ahead and bring on Dean, and I'll go ahead and throw the chat on because this is going to be a very interactive uh, stream, I think, and a lot of people are going to go, "No, you're wrong. No, it's this." So. How you doing this evening, Dean? Or this
Not bad, thank you. Yes, 2 a.m. over here. I've had a few hours sleep, got myself up with a big pot of coffee next to me. I'm raring to go.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and I've got a beer and my
very nice,
my fancy North Texas cushy. So, at any rate, and we've got Peace Gaglione. How you doing? Bring it in on the Rumble side. So yes, everybody like and subscribe, and on the YouTube, and follow on the Rumble side. We need more people on both sides. We got to get to 500 on YouTube before we can open things up for the really fun stuff, right? So, but in the meantime, Cam has a topic. Oh, we got Jeff from Denkar too. So look at that. We got all the cool people are hanging out. Cam, you've got this concept you came up with for this discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce it.
Okay, sure. Well, first, this is a work in progress here. And just before the show, we were kind of going through different things. So a lot of this is going to be hammering it out. And as Jeff said, comments in the chat are, of course, welcome, and you might help us shape this. But the concept is to look at categories of games. It's very typical that someone will say, "Oh, that's an old school game," or "That's a modern game,"
or a rules light, or a rules heavy, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. There's many different elements to it, but in terms, I don't want to say it's a bad thing to do, but it's kind of a hand, at least, to say something's old school or something's modern, right?
Right.
And in reality, there's a lot of details to that. Obviously, you could point to an old school game. OD&D, it would be hard to describe as not an old school game, being essentially the first, if depending on how you categorize all of the origins of RPGs. But and then you would say, in terms of D&D, well, 5.5 or whatever it is they call it would be a modern game. But there's a lot of in between, and it's not just date of when these things came out either. Obviously there's some games coming out now that are distinctly old school, and advertise them as such. So what we're doing here, we're just trying to have a kind of a round table and try to define some of these things with some some criterias and terminology. None of this is set in stone.
Nope.
And it's open for discussion, like I said, by not only the panel here, but
by all of you. Yes,
right.
We might want your feedback. So
right, and we might not agree on some things, and we might on others, but I had taken a first cut at some of this, and in the few minutes before the show, I think we've already improved a few things in different ways we could look at it. So we might revisit this at another time, but this is just a fun discussion, and I guess we can take it from there.
Right.
You want me to kind of start with my first cut? And
why don't
go on?
Yeah, take it from there.
Well, I tried to put some criteria down as a starting point, and I had the rule system and the category being from light to expansive or extensive or heavy. The content of the game, and this is, I don't mean content in terms of modules necessarily, but rules content, like splat books and
Right.
options and things like that for both DMs or players, from high to low. Rules uniformity, and that means consistent systems, like a strict D20 system that's always a D20 versus a DC kind of thing, versus varied subsystems like reaction rolls where you're using a 2d6 for something, maybe something different for turning rules, percentage rolls for this, that, or the other. Strictness of rules, which I've got rules as written versus adjudication. Narrative, which I have as scripted to versus emergent. And of course, you can be anywhere in between any of these categories, right? Story focus, I had setting or the world versus character versus player. And Dean, just before the show, said, well, we should add DM to that also. And then content level. Oh, did I already say I already said content level. Okay, so yeah. And that's just the first cut at this. And Dean, maybe, well, you can explain, but with the idea of adding the DM, this quickly became one of these quadrant kinds of things, where you've got two axes of difference, and you could fall anywhere in that grid. You want to discuss that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. So within your criteria, you talked about things being character focused or world focused, and that was a very interesting concept. And this is typically, your old school games were very world focused. You were dropped into a world, the world simulated around you. You tried to survive, grab loot, and advance a level, and then things started to shift across to more character focused. So things went from a lot of rules and effort being put into the world and how the world acts and how the world's generated, random encounter tables, to more how your characters defined your skills and stuff like that around your characters. And I guess that's the kind of approach you took between character and world focus, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Cam?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. And then you talked about player focus, and player focus is something that's come in very much recently, which is the game seems to be built for the player to enjoy themselves. I think people are banded around things like it's a power fantasy game and stuff like that, where it's all about the player arriving at the table and having this incredible time. And all the rules are skewed towards that. The characters are powerful and over the top. And there's not much, you get to a certain level and the challenge begins to disappear because the characters are just too powerful. They've got too much. There's too many options. But then you got the flip side of that. And there's a lot of systems which are very DM focused. So all the rules are around how the DM runs the game. And There might be some stuff for the players, but it's very much the DM does this, the DM does that, the DM decides this, the DM decides that. And first edition is a great example of how everything is DM focused, to the point where some people believe that players shouldn't necessarily know how to run their characters, because the DM will decide what the player needs and will understand what the character's THACO is. So when the character rolls and makes an attack roll, it's the DM who's adjudicating. They know what the character does, and they're saying whether there's a hit or miss by keeping all that information away from the player. And yeah, so my understanding is that's kind of your approach to very player focused. And of course, you've got the flip side of that, very DM focused games.
Sure, and it's what you mentioned about the DM thing. Is our friend Dungeon Delver, Bill, did mention this in the chat one time. It was like we were talking about something else, but the player's handbook doesn't have anything about what your hit number is for your player or your saving throws.
All of those charts are in the DMG. Yeah,
right. And he said, and by design, he very explicitly said, what you had just mentioned, that was the case on purpose.
Yeah.
So. I don't know if, I don't know what was in Gary's mind, but it certainly does seem to be evidenced by the actual books. So,
yeah. So a couple of rules I think we set out early on. There's some systems that we're going to exclude from this conversation, right? So we're excluding anything. We're trying to focus on the fantasy games, right? So that would rule out anything maybe the cyberpunk genres or any of the space stuff, so cyberpunk and
Star Trek
Shadowrun,
stuff like that.
I mean, Shadowrun is kind of a crossover because it does both.
No, Shadowrun is sci-fi. It's sci-fi first, potential fantasy second. Whereas their other system, Earthdawn, would be very fantasy.
Yeah, and the purpose of excluding those isn't because we don't want to talk about them, but they kind of follow different rules, and we might mention one in terms of a certain kind of category, but we're trying to focus on fantasy right now, and because again, it's that's already a lot to chew on, just by itself. So, correct. Can I suggest that maybe we start with the two ends of the spectrum that we see and try to go through those categories and see if we can agree on that at least?
Sure.
Yeah.
So you want to start up with OD&D?
Yeah. Okay. So actually,
or chainmail. Do you want to start with chainmail?
I don't think so. But let me. So the rough categories that I chose, and again, this is all subject to change, is classic. I avoided saying old school for a reason, but classic game, hybrid game, modern game, innovative game, and then specialty. And obviously, well, let's start with classic because that seems to be. And you mentioned chainmail. It certainly is a game, but I don't know that anybody claims that chainmail alone is a role playing game, though. It's kind of the pre role playing game, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there are some. There are some arguments that have been made that in order to play OD&D you needed the chainmail rules to do it, and I don't know, I was born at that time, but I wasn't old enough to be
think
playing.
That's an interesting debate, one that I am not fully qualified to chime in on. I've heard, like Rob Kuntz has, I think, basically said, no, you don't need it. But well, it's beyond the scope of what we're doing here. So I would suggest we can discuss that, but maybe just not for within this topic.
Yeah.
So let's start with OD&D then, because I think everybody now, some people would say, oh, Blackmore is actually a separate game from OD&D, but kind of the same argument there. So let's start with OD&D. So the first category is rule system. Would we say that, and again, it's not necessarily, on the far end of either of these spectrums, and feel free to say where you think it might fall, but in terms of rule system, light to heavy, where would you guys put that?
Right. Just so people understand it in the chat, when we talk light rules, we're not talking systems that have literally no rules attached to them or very few rules, because a system needs a certain number of rules to be functional. And I've always considered that to be a light rules system. having the rules necessary to do the basics in the game. So if it's a very narrative game and there are hardly any rules, that's not a rules light system. That's a no rule system, because it just doesn't need those rules.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I was going to say, and there is another thing here is even within, let's say, OD&D. Well, the first 3 books of OD&D is one thing, but by the time you get all the expansions for it, it has added, various things. So it, again, none of this is hard and fast, just kind of, our best guess. So my vote would be that it's generally to the light side of rules. But
yeah, I would agree with that. You've got rules in there to cover combat, and then I consider when I start to look for crunchy rules, as in rules heavy, I start to ask the questions of: do you have things like rules on how to survive quicksand, holding your breath, camping, survival, crafting rules? Anything like that adds complexity, adds more rules, and thus makes it more rules light. Basic D&D. Yeah, it just had rules for covering combat. I don't even think it really had much guidance in the way of using your attributes to do other stuff.
Right. There's not a ton. The attributes are kind of, well, I don't want to say secondary, but not heavily accessed.
No, they weren't. I remember my first few games of original D&D, basic D&D. I loved them, but you didn't do much else with your characters. It didn't, even though they kind of said, well, your rules aren't gonna hamper you. We didn't have any rules to even guide us, so we didn't realize we could do things because there was no way to adjudicate them quickly and easily with basic until you had a bit more experience and understood how to do that.
Sure. Jeff, would you agree light, or where on the spectrum of light to heavy would you put OD&D?
Man, I think it's light only because of the entry point that it's at. You know what I'm saying? I mean, obviously there's three booklets, as you could see. The second booklet being the Monster and Treasure. I showed the first page already, the first cover, and then the last one is the Underworld and Wilderness Adventures. So, they're not terribly huge books. And I think that was by design because, I mean, how many pages are we looking at here? All 3 books combined is 116 pages.
Yeah. So you definitely wouldn't say heavy, right?
No, it's not heavy. It's on
0 to 50% light.
Yeah. I would definitely say so.
Okay. So the next one I have is content. Again, this is rules content, not like modules and things like that. And for me, I have it as being, well, to start, definitely low, because you had 3 classes, right? You didn't even have a thief in there for OD&D. So I would put that low. It did grow a little bit, obviously.
We had Fighting Man and
Magic User,
Magic User, and Cleric. Yeah, and that was kind of it.
Right. And even when it did grow, they had Paladins and Thieves eventually came into that, but still relatively minimal. So I put it at a low. Dean, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. There wasn't a huge amount of content. It was the first one on the scene, so they were still building the sort of style of content. They were still building on the foundation that this was establishing.
Right. And again, going back to the war game thing, basically, I think everyone was a fighter. I mean, if you want to put a class to it, I mean, it's like a guy on a field that's fighting, right? Although they might have had things like spy. I don't know that much about about chainmail, but they might, or other classic gaming, they might have had roles of some sort for various units. Obviously, they had things like cavalry units versus infantry units and such, but not a class per se. Jeff, what do you think? You think it's low or high, or
on which?
Oh, this is on content. Basically, like you said, like classes, races. That kind of.
Oh, it's low. Yeah, okay. I mean, really, I mean, yes, they've got elves and dwarves, but
right,
and even at the time, there's a bad word there that they got.
What?
Yep.
Hobbits are fine. Halflings aren't. Oh no, you're right. No,
it's
Hobbits are bad.
Halflings was the solution. Yes. So clerics are limited to men only. Yeah, there was some quirky rules in there, but that I think they were trying to migrate this new thing from being a miniature war game to something different,
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely. If I was to say what D&D is, because people say, "Oh no, Arneson did this or that." In my view, is that it is the merging of a war game and all of the things that came at Blackmore and but before, including Brownstein and so on and so forth, and then they merged and then went forward as Dungeons and Dragons. Anyway, okay, so the next one I've got is rules uniformity, and this again is like for example, if it's just a d20, always roll on d20, that would be a uniform system. And so this one I have is a varied system because there are different kinds of
a lot of
okay, roll these guys.
percentiles,
Right, exactly.
lot of different things that I think they were still trying to find the best way to.
Yeah, and for good, a lot of these things, as I understand, a lot of the things that are in D&D do have, like you were saying with armor class, Jeff, it's like that came from some wargaming
Right.
thing with ships or something, and so all these things are kind of jumbled in. So it's no surprise that it's not uniform, right? It didn't start, someone didn't sit down and say, I'm going to create a game today. It really came from all these different influences. So my vote is varied systems.
Yeah.
Do you agree? Okay, Dean.
Yeah, I would agree. Even from the very start, where you have your attack rolls requiring a high D20 result, and then your saving throws requiring a low D20 result. Out the gate, it's kind of this confused.
Sure.
Are you rolling high? Are you rolling low? And then they kept building on it. Every new thing they had to challenge, they had to look at, seemed to have a different mechanic put to it. And they're exploring. This is the wild frontiers of TTRPG at that time.
Right.
They're exploring what is possible rather than what is uniform.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point you brought up. That the high and low 20 is even not uniform, even though they're both using a D20. Okay, so let's see. Strictness of rules. This is the adjudication versus rules as written. I think this one is clearly adjudication. It's heavy adjudication because they're just they didn't even probably consider many different things, like you were saying about quicksand or something like that. It's like at some point, I'm guessing someone fell into quicksand and they said, well, what do we do with this? Well, I don't know. I made up a rule for it, Jeff, do you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, at that point, I don't even know if they were calling it a dungeon master. It may have still been using the term referee.
Yeah, probably.
So it was everything up to the adjudication of the judge or referee
Sure.
to make that call. If something was not specified, then it had to be done.
Right. And I'm guessing that, well, in wargaming, certainly, war games I've played, it's just two people across the table, and the rules are always rules as written. But I imagine at some point a referee for big games and as they became more elaborate probably was used in wargaming. I'm not that kind of wargamer, I guess, in my roots, but anyway, that's okay. So the next category is narrative, the type of narrative, and that would be the two ends of the spectrum I had there was emergent versus scripted. I think that OD&D at least has a reputation of being emergent storytelling. That's kind of classic old school
storytelling and basic D&D.
Well, narrative, I guess, is
Yes.
what I'm saying. A story does result one way or another, and whether it's a DM that sits there and writes out, this is what I'm going to do, and put them on rails, and they're going to go from A to B, or it's the story kind of emerges from gameplay.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think one of the important things to point out is, it was expected that the DM was going to create everything. This was his own world that he was creating from the beginning. That the players would be out in the wilds or delving into the dungeons, and this was all the DM, or what became the DM's creation and simulation, if you will. That they were trying, and they tried to move away from the whole simulation argument, I think, as time progressed, because it's
Well,
not a simulation.
that's maybe another category we need to talk about, because there's a lot of discussion about simulation in regards to experience. Like the goal, experience for gold is part of a simulation question. AC is a simulation question. Hit points is a simulation question. So that's a whole category which I didn't even consider here, but we probably should add that to the list.
Yeah, you got simulation though in regards to how the world works, and then you got simulation in regards to how the mechanics work.
Right.
And with simulation for the world, you've already got that between character and world driven. The more world driven it is, the more the world will be simulated ahead of what the character has. So I would consider OD&D very world focused, simulated for the world. In that the players inhabit a world, and that world has kind of rules around it, and it's generally the players dropped into the world rather than the story focused around the players.
Yeah, and there was no expectation that the player characters were going to survive
No,
at
absolutely
all
none.
whatsoever. So they didn't have one character necessarily. They may have had 4 or 5 at the ready. So and that's, I think, what a lot of the people, where we use the old school term, that's kind of an expectation that we do see on some of these other systems.
Yeah. So where we're talking, because we're talking at the moment, what was this? This was narrative, wasn't it? Yeah. There wasn't a great deal of narration in that. Stories were typically, here's a dungeon. Do you lot want to play the dungeon? Here's some caverns. And it was very world focused. Here's a part of the world that I've created. Do you want to play in it?
Yeah, and descriptive.
Yeah.
Like was very, very descriptive of you enter this long chamber that's 10 feet wide, and you can see about 60 feet before it fades off into the darkness, and there's a smell of this, and but that's not story per se, right? That's not, you've got a big bad evil guy, and that he's been doing this or that or the other, so it's very kind of.
I think you guys are right. And Jeff, you mentioned about, I designed this dungeon. A lot of early stuff talking about DM. It's like, okay, this is how you design your dungeon. Meaning, it's kind of like, this is how you build your game for people to play in. Kind of thing. And in that way, it's almost like a board game that the DM is creating. Obviously there's a rule set, but in terms of the content, and it's like in the analogy would be, in a board game would be a scenario. You're building the scenario, and then the players come and they play with their little characters.
Right.
Whereas in a board game, of course, it's more typical. It's just, this is it. Here's your character. But how different is that from a pre-gen? It's kind of the same thing. But I agree with what you guys said. Is that you're coming to this and you're playing in the world. That is the next category, by the way, which was I call it story focus. And Dean, this is the one you mentioned with world versus character and DM versus player.
Yeah.
And I think that is a good way to look at it. And so this one is really a 2-dimension. If we're launching our 4-dimensional thing here, this OD&D, I guess I would say, is world and DM. To those 2 directions, as opposed to the other corner being player and character.
Yeah. So let me bring up this, because this is an interesting comment that Chris is talking about. He's saying that we're doing it on a binary level. I think they are axes.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a clear true or false. It's either one or the other. I think there's a varying degree that they can be along those axes. Do you not?
It is, and he's not wrong. We are going through this, and like the thing, light
as a binary. Yeah. What do you think? It's more this or more that? But what we're not saying is, well, it's 50% or 70% or
Ultimately, maybe we will go farther with this, and again, look like we just did, with the quadrant one. So it's a scatter. It will.
Right.
Everything would fall into a different quadrant, heavily or lightly. Depending on whether you're near 0, the middle, or the edges. But again, we're just kind of doing this very rough right now.
This is a rough start. So welcome to it. Thanks thanks for all the comments in the chat. I know Davina, good to see you this evening.
Yes, thanks everybody.
Yeah, and we're trying to keep track of everything. What does she say? Yeah, the game immediately diverges from the adventure book. Well, and here's the thing: in the beginning, there was no adventures. In fact, they did not
Yeah.
expect that to be a thing. They said no.
Mhm.
Every referee or every dungeon master or judge or whatever is going to come up with their own thing.
Well, and that might
Why would we have a pre-published module or a pre-published adventure?
and that probably points to what Dean was saying about being very DM focused, because that's the DM's part of the play, in their original concept, perhaps.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why would a DM not want to play, by doing their
Yeah.
part of it?
And
But
in fact, it really wasn't until Judges Guild said, "Hey, we want to publish this thing,"
Mhm.
and it's a kind of they started doing maps. I think at first they were selling maps at, was it Gen Con or something like that, that they were selling them out of the trunk of their car or the hatchback of their their little Ford Pinto or whatever it was. And then that eventually evolved into published modules. And I think Gary and Dave were surprised at the popularity that was going. And Gary said, we need to rethink this and do
Mhm.
something ourselves. And that's when you started seeing the adventures come out,
Sure.
So
Okay, so would you guys agree that it's well, two axes here: world focused?
Yes.
It's more world focused
Yeah.
than player
Okay.
than character. Sorry, yeah, definitely.
and more DM focused than player focused?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then, well, then obviously we're talking about OD&D as a thing. So I think we probably have 80 to 90% agreement on this, if not more, in terms of that. Do we want to discuss any of that a little further, or do you want to go to the other end of the spectrum and look at 5.5 and kind of go through the ratings just to kind of bound things?
Now, I don't have a 5.5 book. I cut Watsy off.
5e,
But,
yeah,
same here. But yeah,
5th edition I have,
well, does that sound like a good idea? You want to try
Yeah.
that? Okay. All right. So, or the modern game, this is as an example of a modern game. Well, I guess we would do the rating first and then determine whether we think it's modern. That's it. There's many dimensions to all this, but okay. So again, rule system. I would say heavy or expansive versus light for 5e.
Yeah, I'd put 5e in the expansive sort of area, but it's not. It's still got a lot of flexibility to make your own calls. So it's got enough for you to be able to know what skills, for example, are used for and stuff like that. But it isn't so verbose that you have to keep referring to the book every time someone uses a skill. So yeah, if we had a 1 to 5 rating, I'd probably put it at 4 across towards the complexity, the expansive. Yeah.
Kyle, yeah, I agree. And Dean, that's a fair point too. Jeff, what do you think in terms of?
Yeah, I think it's very. I mean, it's obviously very player focused. It's all about what about me? What about me? And it's like, but
well, this
as
is
far
just
as the complexity.
Yeah.
I think it's got. It's not overly complex, but it's on the heavy side.
Yeah. Well, and again, you could, it gets tough with this too, because
once you start throwing the splat books in, that's where you really get that. Okay, we've got this extra thing now, and we've got all these extra feats, and we've got all this and that to throw in, and how many subclasses do you need of how many?
Yeah, but that's content rather than rules.
Right. So okay, let me make a counter argument here that 5e is a D20 system, right? Still,
it is, and
at its core, the D20 system is extremely simple. It's like to adjudicate anything, you have a D20 plus modifiers versus a DC, right? A target number. So in conceptually, it's quite easy. But as Dean mention, I don't remember if it was before or during the show, that there's a number put to everything, right? It's like, oh, okay, you want to walk over this beam, or you want to swing on this rope, and there's just endless numbers and modifiers that go into it, right?
Right.
That would be third edition. Would have those endless
sure,
modifiers.
yeah, third edition has a ton of that, absolutely. And you're right. 5e did try to
5e had
streamline that.
general guidelines, so the DCs were split into 5 categories, and it was up to the DM to decide. It can lead to some laughable situations, as in a game where a DM decided, new DM, that we were leaping over a low wall, and that would be a DC 15 to do so. Right. We then all proceeded to collapse over the wall, and it became a comedy. 5e does try and I can't speak for 5.5. I know they've made some changes, but 5e tried to simplify some of that decision making on skills and put it fully to the DM. Here's your range, easy, very easy, right the way up to almost impossible. You decide given what the players are trying to do, and that keeps it kind of rules lightish. The mechanic, a d20 plus a number equaling or beating another number, is standard throughout. I can't think of, apart from certain random tables which might use different dice. Generally, that's the mechanic that underpins everything. The complexity comes in on the rules, that there is a lot of rules to cover lots of different things, from knocking a creature out to the way certain spells work to the way certain world mechanics work. So you've got starvation rules, you've got holding your breath rules, you've got all the necessary rules required and guidance required to govern how characters can do things. Xanathar's guide for 5e brought in a lot more stuff around skills and how skills could be utilized with kits or tools to basically provide benefits to the characters, and that added more rules rather than just content. To the existing rules, and item creation came in there and stuff like that. So there are a lot of rules. Sorry,
I was going to say Xanathar's and Tasha's both. They kind of were a 1-2 punch in that regard. Because they came out really close to one another, and
they did. Yeah.
So where would you let's say a 1 to 10? I'm just, again, I don't have a ton of experience with 5e, but on a 1 to 10 in terms of rules, light to heavy, where would you put that, Dean?
I'd put it around 7. And the reason being that there's a lot more complicated games. You just need to look at a creature stat block to realize just how much rules there are around it. And creature stat blocks can be easily 1 page with lots of things you have to kind of take into account. So it's definitely got a lot of crunch in there, but it's not the crunchiest by far.
That's a good point. The creature stat block is kind of a very important piece of that whole puzzle.
And that's one of the things I think that with 5.5 they were trying to simplify was the creature stat blocks.
I think so, but the stat blocks I've seen, they kind of simplify in some areas and then overcomplicated in others. And they added complexity with, I think, weapon masteries and stuff like that. And whether it paid off or not, I don't know. I'm not too sure how many people actually play 5.5.
I don't. Yeah, I know one person that's tried it.
But a lot of the stuff you see online, a lot of the stuff you get back, it's all 5e rather than 5.5.
I was recently told the other day that it is the most loved and popular D&D game of all time.
It is not.
Oh, okay.
What, 5.5 or 5e in general, including 5.5?
Including, I think, was what he meant. But,
they're definitely the most played. But whether people hate playing it because there's nothing else being run, or whether people are actually really enjoying it, I don't know.
Yeah. And that could be a whole nother topic too, about why are people playing and how and why are they playing? Okay, so for again 5/5e, we don't, we can just draw as much distinction we want. Content is the next one. I think my perception is high, very high.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every splat book, every single thing brings more and more content, and I'd say that's content that adds complexity rather than content that enhances gameplay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't think 5 is the only one guilty of this. I mean, you could definitely say that about
3.5.
Yeah.
3.5 really is where, but that also happened in 2e as well.
True.
So
when the handbooks came out in 2e, there were so many different options, and Yeah, that added content with a lot more complexity, but that also increased the rules complexity as well.
Well,
Right.
one of my biggest dislikes about what they started doing, what WotC started doing with particularly with fifth edition, was, and I understand their logic for it because they're trying to sell more books, right?
Sure.
But putting DM content and player content in one book, okay, what they're trying to do is get the players to buy
Yeah,
this
make
book.
everybody buy it.
The problem is that now all the players have the book, and so if you're trying to actually run the adventure as written, not that that's possible, mind you, I don't think any of I would venture to say 90% of the adventures that were published by for fifth edition by WotC, anything official, is not playable out of the package. You have to do modification to it. You just, you know, it became a thing where it's like, oh yeah, that does not work at all. You know, players will eat that up, or players will never figure this out, or they're not going to go down this path, or that type of thing.
Yeah.
So and by the same token, you're giving them the keys to the kingdom because you're giving them the whole playbook.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, but we need to sell more books. We're a book publisher, not a game company. Pshaw.
Yeah, can I defend WotC in that regard? Because I
Sure, go
think
ahead.
producing a book which has both player and DM stuff in it is a great way of doing it. Because if you only produce DM based books, you'd sell so few, you'd
Sure.
stop doing it. And having a book that contains stuff for both the person running the game and the people playing the game, I think that's a great way of making sure that book has a lot of value to the person running it, value to the players around the table. And it's a great way of saying, okay, these are the books I'm allowing into the game. You can have any options from these books. And that includes the DM options you've got within those books as well. And that's a great session zero thing. These are the books you can get your races and stuff from, your classes, and these are the books I'm using when I create adventures and so forth. So I support WotC in that. I'd rather have, when I'm running a game, one book I need to buy, which has both, rather than I buy my DM's book and then the players want the players options and I have to buy a player's book on top.
So what my counter argument to that?
It's a debate.
Yeah. My counter to that, I understand the logic financially why they would do that. But if you look at the modules of old, they were not for the player's eyes. They were not.
But
Can I ask
the
a question?
adventure books aren't for the player's eyes. The adventure books are for the DM. I thought we're talking like splat books and stuff like that.
No, I'm
which had
talking
both.
about they have done a market shift where there are player options put right into the book so that they can
Into
sell
adventure
these
books, you're saying,
adventure
Jeff?
books.
Into the adventure books.
Yes.
In which case, that's something adventure books tend to should just be focused on the adventure. That said, second edition did this. They had adventures that brought in player options, but it was up to the DM whether they allowed those options into the game or not.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm going to suggest something that may be an ideal, or maybe it's just I haven't thought it through. is if you have a rule system that is well designed, that you really shouldn't need new rules per se for a game to function. Meaning, if someone buys the book that's got the rules, they understand the rules, and here it is. And content is really kind of a different thing. Meaning, you don't need to add a rule to a content book to understand it. It's just, this is another bit of content that fits squarely in the rules that have already been established. You see what I'm saying? And
Right.
Dean, you got me started thinking when you were talking about Xanathars or whatever. It's like, yeah, there's all new things to do with these skills, but it's like, well, does that mean the skills weren't defined well enough,
No, it's
or
power
there's
creep.
not enough flexibility?
power
Oh, no. For Xanathars, I'd agree. Skills are very, very poorly defined in 5e in the player's handbook. The skills have no detail in them whatsoever. Xanathars provided some much needed guidance to the person running the game as to how the skills were used and what they could be used for, and the kind of DCs to be expected.
So that in that case, then you're alleging that it's the base rules are deficient in that it doesn't. It just kind of says here's a thing and a number.
But the question is, do you actually need that?
You don't.
And
If you're a good enough DM, you can adjudicate on the fly.
see, and
Well,
that,
okay, that's the other question and this gets to the question of adjudication versus rules as written. So if you have a rules as written mindset, you're like, well, it says jump means you can jump over a hole 10 feet and that's it. It's like, well, what about vertical? Well, it doesn't say anything about that. Well, I guess you can't do it. I mean,
Exactly.
but if you
yeah,
have,
I want to see somebody jump 10 feet straight up in the air.
well, okay, yeah, maybe
yeah.
it's 2 feet, but you see what I'm saying is that are the rules written to prompt a DM to adjudicate things like that, and again, these guys, who did the original game, they're coming from something that probably they were debating and discussing. Oh, how's that work? This, where they do that all the time. And
Dragon Magazine was filled with those debates.
Sure.
I mean, literally just insanely filled.
Right, but in the world of today, where everybody has a video game mindset, let's say younger people have a video game mindset. It's like,
Right.
well, it's not like you debate how a rule works in a video game. It just works. It's this or it isn't that, and so maybe if you put it in front of them, like Dean, you're saying, like a 5e book is, and it's like, okay, here's jump, and it doesn't describe it. It's like, well, then they must not be able to do it, and so
that's a mentality needs to be broken, and I've argued about that for a long time, that it should not be a question of playing from the set of rules. Don't play from your sheet. I always tell players, don't play from your sheet. Play from your head.
To bring it back to 5e, which is what we're discussing, within the player's handbook, the skills were kind of explained. It explained what the skills were used for, but there wasn't much guidance when it came to what the DCs were for using the skills in those certain ways, because it was trying to be more adjudication led. And that in itself, because they were playing, trying to get new players on board, I think that drew a lot of criticism. You had new people running the game going, well, I'm not too sure what I should be choosing. I'm not too sure how I should be adjudicating this. And then Xanathar's brought in that level of adjudication guidance, and it's still any guidance. It's the one thing I do like about 5e is they went away from the very complicated, everything has a DC, to a more, these are what the skills are used for. These are your DCs, and you running the game, you have to decide what DC it is based on what the players are trying to do. But it just lacked detail in the players, which was brought in a later book.
Yeah, and we had kind of before this, we were, I think, doing a show just on skills and how skills work and how it shapes games is a whole nother topic that I would love to delve into with you guys.
Maybe a future show.
Yeah, absolutely. But okay, it is a good example for this purpose. But let's move on to the next category here, because we do this all night, because it is.
Yeah.
But okay, so let's see, where did I leave off? Did I move on to content? We did do content, which I think we all agreed was high. Okay, so now rules uniformity. This again is the many different systems and different kinds of roles versus like the D20 system. I would rate this as again, from what I know about 5e, as towards the unified side, meaning it's basically a D20 system. Roll high, is good.
I would say so, but with one caveat. Okay. The rules brought in for each of the subclasses adds unnecessary complexity. And I'm talking about things like the Battle Master straight away has its own rules governing how it works.
Okay.
The Warlock has its own rules governing how it works. And then certain Warlock subclasses have their own rules governing how they work. And then you bring in the Artificer, which is a whole other set of rules. And it's these mini rules that begin over time to add a lot of complexity to the rule system. So definitely started out very uniform, but the more subclasses and the more varied things they wanted those subclasses to do, that needed a rule wrapped around them that wasn't tied back to the core rule of a D20. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm not all that familiar with it, but this is the exact kind of thing that I give them as my ideal example. If you're adding content, which is also by its design necessitating adding rules, then you're kind of failing. And what it sounds to me, Dean, like is that the concept of 5e immediately failed. In two examples you've given, it's like, oh, we want to do this game, we want to simplify it, and then we just put a mess on it.
It worked really, really well at the very beginning. Putting aside the whole fact that not one of their adventures was was playable as written.
Hmm.
You could, as a DM, especially if you had the experience of running before, I think I didn't start running until third edition, but with that experience, I was able to navigate and adjust. I think
Can I ask,
sure,
is it did it work because there just there just wasn't that many things weighing it down? Meaning, like Dean
yeah,
said, oh, it's a warlock or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, there's a few things you got to know, but it was only a handful of them, so it didn't bog down the game. But as you
right,
went on and on, adding more content, then now each one of those things brings another rules subset and a special condition, or X, Y, or Z, and now you've got to deal with 100 of these different things, all weighing down the basic core mechanic.
yeah,
Is that fair to say?
yeah.
What is I don't know the answer to this. Is that why at the beginning it seemed like it worked well?
It worked well for the first couple of years,
Okay.
actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I if that's the case, I would say then that is still a design flaw, though, because even though it didn't break under the weight that they initially put on it, they were already planning on putting more weight on it that it wouldn't hold. You see what I'm saying? It's maybe I'm not explaining that well. The game system was designed to be adding all of this extra weight, meaning extra content that would make the game unreasonable to manage from the get. Meaning, even though that weight wasn't put on it from day one, the system was built to know that they were going to be putting all that weight on it. It would make it unplayable.
They started adding subclasses for, basically, what took and made a magic user unique. Suddenly, any class had magic abilities, basically, with some of these subclasses, and that is what helped to make things more complicated. When
But even in that example, you're using the spell system to govern the use of spells, so you're not adding something complicated.
Yeah.
If we have a look at something like the Rune Knight came in, and all of a sudden you got someone who can become a huge size. So for a DM, they're suddenly having now to deal with a whole other set of rules, which is large creatures as players. Rules that they wouldn't normally have to worry about. And it's these additional rules that each subclass brings in that just keeps adding complexity and complexity. Nowhere near as much as Pathfinder. Pathfinder, every class had its own set of rules governing how that class was used. And if you're running the game and someone brought in, say, and I'm trying to think, you got the Eidolon guy, the guy who would summon and bring in the summons as part of them. There's a whole host of rules around that. And we're talking 5e, but 5e started quite neat. You had your 12 classes with their subclasses, and you kind of thought that's as much of the rules as we're going to have when it comes to how the classes are governed. And then a splat book comes along, and hang on, we've done things differently for this subclass and differently for that subclass. And spellcasting doesn't quite work the way you thought it worked. It works differently for this subclass. And now all of a sudden, you got the person who's running the game having to remember, hang on, I've got this person. Summoner, the Summoner, one of the worst classes in Pathfinder. I really hated that one. And you got the DM who's now suddenly thinking, hang on, I've got to remember that when I'm running the game, your class acts differently, and there's something I need to take into account now because you're playing this class. And the Artificer was one of those. The Artificer just brought in summoned creatures and this and that and the other, and pets, and oh my god, and started the whole when I'm in melee, I'm going to use intelligence instead of strength. So now I just have 2 stats to worry about, or 3 stats: dex, con, and intelligence. And if I max those out, then I'm fine. I'm king. I don't have to worry about strength or dex, strength for melee combat. So you end up with this horrible mess of rules that just keep adding complexity.
Right.
Yeah, this you bring up a good point here, and again, it caused me to ask a question: is it a mark of a poorly designed system that the DM has to be well versed in every detail of every character to know how to run the game? You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying the general rules. I'm saying the specific rules to these, this combination of things on your character sheet affect how I run the game. That doesn't seem to be a good setup to me.
I think it's virtually impossible to do that. Unless you have a eidetic memory and
well, I think you're probably right. But is that one of the problems with 5e? that
Yeah.
you have all of this stuff, and because there's people are DMs, 5e DMs have a lot of complaints, right? They're like, this is, it's a pain. People talk about burnout and all this stuff, right? I mean, and even though I think some people are drama queens about that, I think there probably is a lot to it. This is a mess of a system at this point, even though I guess they tried to clean it up. How do you keep track of all that?
Oh, well, I think one of the biggest successes to Shadow Dark, and I know we haven't quite touched on that, is the fact that you had DM burnout from 5e. And I watched a lot of streams when I was looking at why is Shadow Dark so successful, and a lot of them with the DM was moving their table across to it because they were sick and tired of the burnout they had under 5e, all the little rules, the complications, the exceptions, and they wanted to move to something that was just straightforward, still had some depth, but was straightforward to run. So yeah, I agree. However, that said, there are some DMs who will thrive on this level of complexity. There are DMs who love Pathfinder because it has all those numbers, and they love games where they are that level of crunch and they've got all of this and their mind's just working away where that's the game, that's their perfect game. So I wouldn't say necessarily it's a bad game. It's a very different game. It's not a game that I would like to run because of the mental fatigue.
And honestly, I kind of lean that way a little. Again, bearing in mind I'm more of a player than a DM. The crunch has never bothered me. You know what I mean? It's going through that and being like, I'm going to use a terrible word here, builds. I don't mind builds, right? I mean, it's a certain way of playing for sure that's different. I don't mind playing more classic style either. But I guess I am one of those people. But I definitely can see that would be a different story if you were the DM.
Yeah.
I had a point and I forgot it. So let's just move on.
Yeah. What's next? What's next on the thing?
Next
An hour
is this is the topic that we got. We got something else to talk about, Joe?
No.
Okay. I just want to make sure we.
I would just say we're two systems in.
Well, we're trying to hammer out kind of
where we're going,
the methodology, and see if this makes sense to anybody. Okay, the next thing is strictness of rules, meaning rules as written versus adjudication. Dean, you kind of mentioned. See, my perception is that this is a rules as written thing, where you've got players that's like, no, pounding on the rule book and saying you can't do that, DM. It says it here that my character can do this. So my perception is that leans towards rules as written.
It empowered rules lawyers. Is what it did. They forget the first rule 0.
Now
that said, there was still a lot of room for the DM to adjudicate, but that was mostly on the skill side. Where the rules as written came in was on the combat and what the classes could do side. So the classes were well defined. The classes would say you can and give what you can do, leaving the DM no wriggle room to say, well, actually, in this situation, that doesn't apply. And it empowered the players.
Didn't stop us, but
it more empowered the players. Not as much as 3rd edition did, but 5e still had a lot of power put to the players' side. And it's this balancing act. Players want to feel they've got some agency around the table. They got some consistency to what they can do. At the same time, you want to give a lot of flexibility to the DM so that they can adjudicate the unexpected and the unusual.
Sure. Yeah. See. I'm sorry I'm putting us on tangents here, but this is another thing that I've experienced in the past. People say, "Oh, you see, when you have skill systems, people are just looking at the character sheet," which is true. But I've seen the other side of this too. When you don't have things that are well defined, then I've seen tables that you have your rules lawyers type that will, without having something defined, makes it bad as well, because they'll say, "Well, no, you see, because this or that," and kind of turn every single thing into a debate, as opposed to just saying, look, if you want to jump 10 feet, you roll this and that's your DC, Right. So I think both can be bad. And it's really probably more of an issue of bad players, or I shouldn't say bad players, but players that want to have their way. And I think systems that have more rules can be a bulwark against that. But I also think what Jeff said is probably true, that it could go too far and could be like where you're constraining the DM. So what do you guys think about that? Have you experienced any of that in your years of playing?
Jeff, do you want to take that on first?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was looking at something else.
I bored the panel. I'm sorry, it was my fault.
No,
But
no, no, no.
Oh, no.
I was looking at
I've got
something
a
else
lot to
because
say. Yes.
something. Well, why don't you go ahead and Dean, and then I'll
You want
follow
me?
up with you.
So when 5e first came out, it was that balancing act between giving the players enough definition so that they knew what they could do, but also giving the DM a lot more flexibility in how they adjudicated how certain things were done. Every splat book has made the rules more important than the DM adjudication, even down to the way certain spells work. So the most arguments I've had running 5e have been around how the wording of a spell. And the problem you've got with 5e is it's not as wordy as, say, third or second when it comes to spells, but it's not so loose that the DM actually can say, well, no, this is up to me to decide how the spell is done, given how you've described your use of it. Glyph of warding is a classic there. I had a player who had enough time and they wanted to use glyph of warding in a certain way. And I turned around and said, well, if you do it that way, then my bad guys can also do that. And their layers will be littered with glyphs of warding that they just walk over and heal spells activated, because that's exactly what you're trying to do. And then you have this rules as written argument, which is, well, the spell says, and I'm saying, well, no, that doesn't make sense. It's world breaking. And I think 5e, the more stuff you had come out of it, the more you entered into this giving players rules that they can use against the DM. And that's where your arguments come in. That's where the rules as written come in. And that's where 5e started to move away from its core principle of kind of that fine line between giving consistency for the players, but also giving adjudication to the DM.
Okay. Jeff, you got something on this? If not, I have another comment.
Go ahead and make a comment.
I think a lot of this, I don't think, sorry, let me start again. A lot of people look at the rules and say this causes XYZ. It causes, the game is this because the rules say this. But I think that's not quite true. I think a lot has to do with the mindset of the players as well. And are you guys familiar with, when a player is a munchkin?
Munchkin?
Yes.
Right. Okay. That kind of player, right? It doesn't matter what rule system they're using. That kind of player is that kind of player, right? At the same time, I do think that certain rule systems lend themselves to promoting that, a particularly negative thing. Like you were saying, Dean, it's like, they're going to try and use this, and yeah, the rule might say that, but literally, but use your head a little bit. The game turns into a nightmare if you go down that road, kind of thing. So it's, again, nothing is as cut and dried as I think a lot of people want to make it out to be,
Yeah.
And the takeaway from this is, don't blame the game for you being a crappy player or being a crappy DM or whatever. It's the rules have enough grounds to be criticized without adding everything to blame, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff, I know you now are going to wow us.
No, I was trying to fix something. Something was bugging me. I think you guys are both on point on that. It's just the Munchkin players. Yes, you're going to have them, just like the murder hobos. You're going to have those too.
At least murder hobos are honest. But
they are. Yeah, Munchkins are going to try. You've got the rules lawyers. So you've got all the different player types. Trying to discourage, just going in and doing everything possible, trying to max out and this was my biggest complaint about 5e, right? The passive skills, for example. I absolutely detest the passive skills. I understand the premise is like, well, this is something that they're always going to do, but what happens is you just encourage the players to front load all their skill points into those passive skills, so they literally walk into anything and they see every door, every trap, every secret door, every this, every that. And if you for some reason try to deny that, then that usually starts an argument at the table.
Yeah, because they feel they're being cheated, even though
Yep.
It's all about
this says I got 26 points in my passive perception, so I should be able to see everything that's, and it's like,
well, that's also
I got
kind
into
of
this
the
about
superhero thing, right? That's kind of the superhero thing too. You have an expectation
Mm.
that you can be a superhero. So I put all my points into this, so I should be able to X-ray vision through, everything and know everything, right? I think that's kind of the point you were making offline, is that, it's just, what am I supposed to do?
If I want to play a superhero game, I'll play a superhero game.
Sure.
This is not superhero. This is not fantasy superhero stuff. And now, more power to you if you like that. I don't want to be a superhero. I want to be, yes, passive aggressive. 26 points in passive aggressive is right.
Yeah.
Why do I? They do. And you're absolutely right. I see Ryan's comment here, and yeah, you're right. They can always be disinvited if they don't want to get up to it. Chris is right too. It really is up to the DM. The problem is that a lot of new DMs are going to be intimidated from doing that.
Yeah.
That's a very confrontational position, and not everybody, particularly somebody who is still new at DMing, would maybe not be able to handle.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pressure on the DM. Again, picture these new people, and you've got, it just social dynamics. It's you against 4 other people, kind of thing. It's like, and obviously the players would tend to have, be on the same side against the DM. The DM's the one presenting the challenges,
Right.
So it's not. I'm not saying it's a healthy attitude to have, but
yeah, and often the players causing the problems are your friends as well.
Sure.
So you clamp down, you say you're not welcome at my table, you're destroying a friendship at the same time. So it's a fine line between trying to maintain your friendships and trying to manage a player who thinks what they're doing is absolutely fine.
That's true. And maybe not only just that relationship, but a whole group's relationship, but
yeah, you upset the one player, the whole group turns against you. You've now got no one around your table. And
yeah, and this is absolutely true. Kyle says that most people have a hard time saying no, and that's not just in games.
Yeah,
I am notoriously bad about that. I have a hard time saying no.
I think
we want to be liked by other people, right? We want to be liked by our players, and yes.
But I think you should come to the table with a little bit better attitude. Again, this is another subject, but I did a lot of board gaming, and if people came to the table with that attitude, it's like, well, this is supposed to be fun. If you have a need to get one over on someone outside of fair play, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, everybody wants to win. It's like, you play these games. Yeah, I'm playing to win, right? But if you need to push things to a level where it does make personal relationships uncomfortable to serve that need, then maybe it is time for that person to find another hobby, or a different hobby away from you. But
yeah, and Chris's point is one of the reasons why gatekeeping a hobby is probably not a good thing, but gatekeeping your table is.
Oh yeah. That you can gatekeep your table quite happily, and that's where gatekeeping should be. If you don't like the modern stuff, then don't have it at your table. Gatekeep it that way.
And lay down the rules. That's what a session 0 is, right? Okay, these are the things. Now other things may come up that we'll have to adjudicate. I think one of the best points I've ever heard, though, is if you do make an adjudication, you don't let it stop gameplay at that point. And then you maybe discuss it after that session, kind of a brief little wrap up, and be consistent about it in the future.
Well, that's true. Professor Dungeon Master was talking about that, right? It's like he doesn't want to go to the rule book at the table. He wants to keep things moving. It's like, nope, I'm making this ruling, and we can talk about it afterwards, And if he gets it wrong, he gets it wrong, And then you adjust for the future. So I think there's a lot to that. I'm sorry, I have totally dragged us off into another tangent, but I'm enjoying talking and discussing these things. I like doing this. Okay, so I think we're to narrative at this point, and this is scripted versus emergent.
With 5e?
Yep.
It's very scripted.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's very scripted. Particularly the way the adventures are written, it seems like everybody's trying to tell their epic tale, instead
point.
of allowing it to emerge as would be the alternative, with players. The term railroading is used a lot, but really a lot of the adventures are railroads.
Well, yeah, and that's applying to it. That's an accusation against the DM usually. But you just brought up a very good point. I think that it's the players that are trying to railroad things too. In a way, it's like, oh no, you see, I made my epic backstory of 40 pages, and that has to be in here.
Yeah.
So I have to be, you have to explain why I'm the prince of the world, and da da da. I mean, so I think that's a very well. I don't know if it is a modern mindset, but I don't know that it's just started. This might have gone on for some players for a while.
Yeah.
Dean, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I'd say it's very, very scripted, and you just need to look at one of the most well-known adventures is Tyranny of Dragons. I know they combined the two, but you had Horde of the Dragon Queen and Tiamat, Rise of Tiamat, I think it was, which is effectively Tyranny of Dragons. And in there you have words such as the party are going up an encounter, use the balancing of a hard encounter against the party. So everything is always geared around the party, their level, their narrative. The council will see the party. The council will talk to the party about this. The council will. At no point does the world advance without the party doing something, even to the point where the missions are given and it waits for the party to attempt the mission before results are given. And it doesn't have things like, I would have much preferred to have had a kind of timeline of these are the events that are going to happen, and then give you the option of saying how things react. So if the party ignores something, they ignore it. And then the bad effect of that comes out after a certain period of time. And that would be a far better way of making it very world focused rather than scripted. But as it is, that adventure is very scripted. It waits for the party to do something before it moves things on.
That very much goes back to the whole category of is it world focused or is it player focused?
Yeah.
And all these adventures with 5e are player focused for the most part. I think there's been some attempts at trying to break that cycle, but for the most part, that is the way that the published adventures are. It's no, these are the savior, and that's the other thing that drives me nuts too. Is it's like, oh, this great cataclysm is happening, and we've got this big book, and it's up to you to fix it. Or,
but that I don't mind so much, because the players want to feel like they're valued around the table. They're not just nobodies in this big world, that they've got some way of affecting the world and becoming the heroes. And that's that's just a kind of uplifting thing. It's like why we watch films like Lord of the Rings, because we want to cheer the not absolutely not at first
maybe
level,
10th level,
but you want to feel you're building towards something as a player. But it's that balancing act between everything means you can't die and you're going to succeed, and you're going to be the superheroes of the story, to there's a world happening around you and the camera's focused on you as players right now because you're part of that world. Let's see how you interact with that world. Let's see where you go. And that's kind of player focus, but within a world that's living and breathing.
The world should continue around people without
that's
a doubt.
The point.
If you don't do anything, that's one of the reasons why I love the whole timers, because some of the adventures. Oh, he's furiously typing now.
Oh, that is.
Yeah. he heard the word timers and he's like, oh, I got to type that down. No. But that's my feeling is that's kind of why I like some of these games where players can drop in and drop out.
It's horses for courses, really. And you'll find some players love it where their characters are nobody in the world. They can drop in, they can play different characters and stuff like that. And other people want to feel they're part of a story. And you got to find the right table for you. Neither route, I think, is bad. But what I think is 5e took it to another level, which is you are the superheroes of your story.
Yes.
And for me, if you like that style of game, fantastic, fill your boots. But for me, that was just too much, especially as a DM. You couldn't simulate a world. You had to simulate something for the players. And in fact, you couldn't simulate at all. It was all very player focused, especially when running the adventures. When you're making your own adventures, you got a lot more flexibility, but as they gain levels, the world focuses more and more on what they can do and how they can ruin your world because they gain access to spells that are just stupid. And that's why Lorien Studios stopped level advancement, I think, at 13th or 14th.
Did they?
12th, sorry. They stopped level advancement at 12th because from 13th level onwards, the spells that they would have to write into the game would break the whole world. And it's the argument I've always had against D&D, which is some of the spells are just stupid. And if you had them in reality, in a fantasy world, they make the world very small, they make the world very insignificant, and they remove the fantasy from the world, they move the journey from the world. And that's a discussion for another day, I guess.
Sure. I would agree. I think at least my perception of 5e is that it's scripted. Jeff, you kind of went into this about the story focus again, player, story focus being player. I think that's my vote, at least for 5e, is player focused, as opposed to DM focused. And then, of course, we already talked about this is the same as character versus world. Kind of this 4-quadrant thing.
I think, especially at lower levels, it's very important to focus more on the think local, not global.
Yeah.
And I think that should be the focus. And one of the other criticisms I have with regards to 5e, because I know we've been spending quite a bit of time on 5th edition talking about it. I'm not bashing it per se, but they got away from doing these.
Mm-hmm.
They got away from doing
a module,
a little module, and went into doing big, ginormous books. Now, the big books, don't get me wrong, and I know we're going to go into 3rd edition here in a minute. This is my favorite book. Period.
It's for the Forgotten Realms. It's one of the best. The source stuff you got in there is incredible. It's just chock full of stuff. And
it's useful for both. This is a book. This is the type of book that is useful for both DMs and players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is not a DM only book. This is not a player only book. This is a world setting type book.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's a 2nd ed version, really good. But the 3rd ed, wow, I'm really impressed with the work that went into that.
And by the way, I got to give a shout out to Chubby Funster, because he's the one who brought this to me at North Texas, and I had this book, and I loved this book absolutely, and it's even got his name in it, so, in the inside cover. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. My book's up at the lockup at the moment. When we got the proper bookcase behind, it'll be returned there.
Yeah, I wish I had the gray box edgelord. That was that. I lost a lot of stuff, including most of my 3rd edition stuff, but I had some 2nd edition stuff too, and even some of the Gary Gygax's Dangerous Journeys and stuff like that. So, which
we could have a whole show and tell episode, I suppose, because there's all kinds of great stuff. That doesn't mean don't do it.
Rich does his shelf tour. He's got a series of shelf tours, which I think is great. And I'm like, oh, I've got that, or oh, I want that. There's a lot of that. But at any rate, but yeah, I mean, that shift, and that happened really after 3rd edition, because there were the smaller adventures in 3rd edition. There haven't been any of those per se, nothing of note in 5th edition that I can think of. They the closest you
they're
get
going
is
for hardbacks all the time, right?
Yeah,
but that was because it was one of the things that took down TSR. They had too many of these leaflet-based or booklet-based adventures, and people would buy the ones they liked, and so they would overprint and not end up selling enough. And WotC decided, let's try and avoid that problem, which is have more focused stuff that we know is going to sell, rather than a lot of stuff that people will only buy bits of.
But it's fixed that these days.
PDFs.
And print on demand.
And print on demand. Absolutely. Today, I would, and it's one of our plans. I prefer having these leaflet-based or pamphlet-based, booklet-based adventures, which look at a site on your world and say, right, what's here? What adventures do you have here? Let's flesh out this part of the world. And here, if you're running the long-running campaign, is the next part of that campaign or storyline or something you can slot into whatever campaign you're doing.
Cool. You know, one note I wanted to make. Again, I don't remember if I said. I know I said it before the show, and I don't remember if I did. This friend of mine was talking about how 5th edition is the greatest game. You know, is the greatest D&D, and everybody thinks so. And then this is the same guy though, and this is in relation to Dean, what you were saying about all these rule systems, everything. This is the same guy that says I can't play without my computer, right? Because he has to have everything where he can look it up. And so many things automated for him because it is such a mess, right? And I mean, even though he says it's the greatest thing ever, he's not standing back and saying, well, what if someone isn't sitting at a computer or doesn't want to do that? How is it then? How are they going to enjoy it at that point?
I would agree. D&D Beyond has helped massively with the success of 5e around tables. In fact, the last campaign I ran, everything was on D&D Beyond. And when I ran a game, I had multiple tabs open to all the different bits of information I needed. Yeah. And you know what? It was still a headache. And I'd rather play a system where my creature stat blocks are nice and neat and small, that I have them on one page in front of me, than having to keep doing different tabs to access the information. But from a player's point of view, you got all that information at your fingertip. You want to know what a spell is? Click, done. You got your spell.
Yeah. Kyle's got a very poignant comment here. He says, modules had very specific goals. The playing field had smaller boundaries, and that was by design. But when a game focuses on players, modules don't fit very well anymore.
No. Modules are very world-focused, not player-focused.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Okay, where do you guys want to go with this now? We got about another little over a half hour before I got to go. You guys can continue on all night. Well, Dean has to go to sleep.
Dean needs breakfast.
I've got a big day on Monday, so
okay.
Yeah,
so
I'll
let's cut it off at that half hour. But what would you guys like to take a shot at another example, another game, and try and go through this, or do you want to talk more about?
Should we go to 3rd edition, or should we save that for a future one?
I think 5th and 3rd probably have a lot of similar. I'm not saying they're the same, but maybe if we choose one that I'm going to suggest maybe Shadow Dark, because I think that falls between. You know, I would call it a hybrid, but we could explore anything you want. I'm just trying to hit the boundaries, of these different categories, but I don't care. I'm having fun with this, so we can talk about whatever you want. You can pick.
I mean, I've got, a whole bunch of stuff up here.
Yeah. I mean, it's useful to talk about Shadow Dark, because Shadow Dark was trying to address a problem with 5e, which was DM fatigue. And I think that's the main reason it came in.
I think it does advertise itself this way too, right? It's like modern mechanics with old school feel, or, I don't know if I use that exact phrase, but something like that, right?
Yeah.
And it very much is. I mean, that's the premise,
Well, let's run through it and see where we fall. So let's go to rule system, light to heavy.
So it calls itself right here, and this is like one of the first pages. This is page 7. It says it's a rules light system. Rules light and intuitive. Okay. So and the way that they handle making it rules light is everything is a check against a stat, not a skill. So it's really totally an adjudication based type of thing, where the game master in this case is the one making that decision.
Yeah, it's very attribute led in that if you want to climb something, depending on how you want to climb it, it's either strength or dexterity, more than likely strength. And then you make a roll against the DC, adding your strength modifier. It's got some great rules around things like spell casting, stuff like that. And then it doesn't try to expand too much on it. It means the character class is actually quite, I wouldn't say boring. They're well defined, but what you can do with the class is actually a very narrow kind of, you're beholden to your 2d20, a 2d6 roll when you gain your talents at certain levels. So you could end up with a character that absolutely bums out on what you want it to be. But at the same time, it's a grimdark setting. So I don't think that that's a problem. I think that feeds nicely into a grimdark setting, which is your characters will die at some point, because this game is designed to be against you at every step of the way. Meaning if you succeed and you survive and you get loot, brilliant, but your next adventure could be completely different.
Well, and one of the things that they even implemented is funnels, which is a DCC concept.
Yeah.
There are funnels, level 0 funnels, and so you may play 5 different characters, in a funnel, and whichever one makes it, the first one to make it is the one that you get to run with.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And that's a nice style of game. I wouldn't say that's an old school style of game, because I think the concept of funnels wasn't probably around, even though you might have a game where you had backup characters. So if this character dies, I'm going to be now playing this. Or, especially in basic, creating a character was quite a quick process. So if you lost your character mid-session, you would quickly create one and be jumping back in again.
It's pretty quick to roll up a character.
It is in Shadowdark as well. Yeah.
So it sounds like we would all agree that light is a fair assessment.
Yeah.
You've got enough rules to run the game. Not so many, and the setting doesn't have things like domain play and wilderness survival. I know you can do wilderness-based adventures, but it's focused very much on that kind of old school. Get in, do a dungeon, get back out again.
Yeah,
so it's got all the rules to do that.
Now we'll see with Western Reaches, which I think I have a copy.
That's expanding content, right?
That is expanding content,
and then it will be adding new rules. So the rule crunch starts to go from light towards heavy.
Yeah. So
okay, well, let's go through the category, and I'd love to hear the commentary with all this too. But rules uniformity, it seems to be pretty uniform. I mean, it's basically a D20 system, right?
Yeah, it's D20, and everything is roll D20 and check against your, whatever the check is, it's going to be against one of your attributes plus your bonus.
Yeah. So. Attribute plus a D20 versus DC or AC or whatever it happens to be. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Okay. Strictness of rules, adjudication versus rules of
totally adjudication.
Yeah.
It seems that by necessity it has to be.
Because the rules, it's rules light. The game master is the one making the decisions on what skill do you do. It even in adventures, it doesn't necessarily, in some of the zines or whatever that have been published for it, they don't necessarily say what skill you need to do. They sometimes will have suggestions, but if a player comes up with a good idea, run with it. And I think Kelsey would be the first one to tell you that.
Yes.
If they propose something great, and they're doing something that you totally didn't expect, but it sounds like it's plausible,
right?
Set a DC for it.
I've got very little experience with Shadowdark. Erudite invited me to play, and I played the first time last week. I'm going to play again this week. It was a good time. But the thing that I did, I have been kind of going through the rules, is that, for example, in the Thief, it does refer to stealth and navigation, or these different things that are like skills, right? there aren't, the skills aren't in the game, but it's kind of talking about functions, right? And saying and putting advantage to them. It's saying, oh, you get advantage on doing these things, which is implying that you can do these things explicitly, meaning there is a roll that you will do to see if you're stealthy. Without defining that, in a hard way. I'm kind of, I like that idea. I think that is very much a lifeline to the 5e player, though. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's telling them that, oh yeah, it's like the skills that you're used to. But I think I recall Kelsey being on an interview saying she didn't like skill. She doesn't like skills. That was one of the things she wanted to get rid of, and did. But I've also, sorry, go ahead, Dean.
It's okay. The only difference between a skills-based system and something like that is on one you got attributes, on the other one you got skills that are defined from those attributes.
Yes.
Right.
So it's a great design principle, which is if you're only using attributes, then your character can do everything. because you don't define those attributes any further. You got dexterity, anything dexterity based your character can do. So the great way of writing in expertise in an area where you haven't got the skills is you say things like, you're a stealthy class. So when you attempt something that's stealthy, you get advantage. Everybody can attempt something that's stealthy, but you're better at it than other people. And that's a great way of doing it. If you had a skills-based system, then you'd be saying something like, you have this skill and you're really good at it. Whereas other classes don't.
So many points into that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is you're taking something that's very light and then adding not complexity, but you're adding depth and player options. And this is where you go to the area that you love, Cam, which is you're going from I've got this character, and we've done it with basic Untold Destiny. It's all very attribute driven. And then your class tells you if you're good at doing certain things with those attributes, to then which will be our advanced version. You've now got all these skills that are derived from attributes. So you've got a more granular way of actually designing a character. And I say designing, building, whatever it happens to be. And you know what? Vicky loves the advanced side of things, but there's a lot of other people who love the basic side of things. I don't think there's a problem with either. I think they both serve a purpose. And I don't think either, if the system is designed right, will have you looking at your character sheet to say, what can I do?
Right.
The system should promote what am I wanting to do? Now let's look at what roles are required to do that.
Excellent point. And this is what you just said there is referring to what I said about blaming the rule system for the player mindset. If the player has the right mindset, then the character sheet serves their goals and what they want to do rather than defining the goals because the character sheet says you could do it.
So the other thing that they give you, which is a modern mechanic, is the advantage. Well, you and I had a little bit of a debate about whether or not that's a modern mechanic, because there's some origins and some second edition stuff, right?
Yeah, technically it isn't new, but it certainly became very common in five.
Right. But with the thief, right? It specifically says you're trained in the following tasks and have advantage on these associated checks: climbing, sneaking, and hiding. So that means that you're gonna roll 2d20.
Yeah.
And take the high.
But the word trained in there is just used gently. It's not you have a training condition or something. It's
a verb.
Right.
You're
trained.
Yeah.
That's just not discussing that you know about these things. It's not like you have trained or untrained.
Yeah, it's not a keyword with or a term within the rules. It's you've got training, which means you have advantage. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but here's the thing I'll say about that is I question how well this would work if you didn't come from a mindset where you already understood that sort of thing. You know what I mean? It's like, again, a lot of Shadow Dark players are coming from 5th edition. And like I said, I think that's a bit of a lifeline to them because it's something they will enjoy. And I'm not saying it's a bad design at all. I'm saying how easily that someone understands it is rooted in their prior knowledge.
The thing I like is it's easy to run and it's easy to play.
Yeah.
And those two things is what makes it fun.
Sure.
And it's very, very, as we said, it's very up to the game master is the one that's making the adjudication. They're telling you, okay, give me a dex check. Let's do a dex, or let's go do this or that. Based upon the circumstances and the environment and what it is that the player is trying to describe. I mean, the character sheet is like nothing, right? So I mean, this is the character sheet,
right?
Yeah. So there's not much for a player to sit there and go shuffle. Oh, what's this? Oh, what's that? No, you don't have that. There's none of that. So
yeah.
Okay, let's I'm going to push through this a little bit. Narrative, emergent versus scripted. And again, I guess this is highly dependent on the table, but do you think that the rule system, the Shadow Dark rules themselves leans towards one or the other?
I think they lend towards emergent.
I would agree. You got rules around things like, if the players are making too much noise, make a random encounter table roll or an encounter roll, stuff like that. It's very world driven where the players are dropped into the world and then they've got to survive in that world.
Sure.
To add to what Jeff was saying previously, I think there's going to be a lot of 5e players which find that quite refreshing, but I also think there's 5e players that will find it quite frustrating because it is a grimdark setting. And I know grimdark seems to be the big favorite at the moment, but there are some players who will come from 5e where their character has the spotlight on them and be dropped into this. And when the novelty wears off, I think those players will be going, I keep losing characters, I don't like it. And it's that balancing act between, having a system where your character's a bit more meaningful in the system, or having a system where you just got to get used to rolling up characters because death is around the corner.
In that regards, it's very much, I hate to throw the word out there, but old school, because that was the way it was expected.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
and I don't like the idea, and I know some people out there do, but I don't like the idea of projecting oneself into your character. I don't think
well, meaning that you, if your character dies, that says something bad about you or makes you personally depressed.
Right. Well, I think that's
there's a lot of attachment issues. I
be
think
creative with your character and try and put yourself into the role of that character of what would this character be doing if I were in that kind of mindset. That's fine, but it's like, this is not your personification of you as an elf or you as a dwarf or whatever.
I don't think it's that. I think certain players put a lot of effort into their characters. When they create a character, they put a lot of thought into how that character would work within that world. They give it a personality. It's not based on them, but they put time and effort into the creation of their character. And if the character dies quite quickly, that time and effort gets less and less and less. And if it's a player that thrives on having a living, breathing character that they can visualize within the world, so immersion, I can see players like that getting a little bit tired and becomes almost like a board game at that point. You're creating a meeple, you're dropping the meeple in. Does the meeple survive? Brilliant. Does it get some treasure? Great. And that's your level of connection to the character. But that's not a problem in itself either.
But now that character is basically scripted because you wrote a 12-page backstory for it.
You don't need a 12-page backstory.
No.
You just got a bit of thought into how that character is, and you relate.
But yeah, I'm saying, and that's something to be said about the whole 3d6 down the line thing, which I personally don't like 3d6 down the line.
I don't. Yeah.
But that's why some people argue for that. It's like, no, this is what you're dealt with. You play it. It's all totally random, and you run.
It's a style of play. It's a style of play.
Yeah, it is. And
it's fun for conventions.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And for getting people round a table, just have a quick game.
Yep,
absolutely perfect.
Great.
Perfect.
But
in terms of the because before I said don't blame the game for your thing, but like I said, I think things do lean towards that. When you have an extensive backstory mechanic for building your character, I think it kind of prompts the player to think about, well, what is my character? What is their life like before this? So. And that doesn't really exist in Shadow Dark. So it is kind of a game where it's like, yeah, here's your bot. You come to the table, and if they survive, great. And maybe something emerges from that. I'm not.
And that's what I'm saying is whereas, scripted, in this case, the player is emergent, or the player character is an emergent, because it becomes through its experience. And I think that's the best way of play, in my personal opinion. That's the best thing, is for, you're a level 1 character, you're a nobody. You ain't nothing. And now as you advance and you make a name for yourself, what's up, Steven? Mr. Living large in Asia.
Let me ask the next question, and then maybe this will inform this overall discussion more, and that's the story focus. Again, world versus character, and I think we've already kind of said, well, we haven't. World versus character and DM versus player.
Yeah.
I would say that, I don't know. My feeling is that this is a character focused game still, even though it's light, and that doesn't tend to be old school in this sense. I have very limited experience. I think it is, because I don't think there's a strong world behind Shadow Dark inherently. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. There's not enough rules to simulate a world in Shadow Dark. So what you're creating is a small arena that the players are dropped into and play through and then come out of. So yeah, I would agree. I think it is very, I wouldn't say very character focused, but it's definitely leaning on the character focus side.
Okay. Jeff, what do you think? The character versus world.
Well, by the definition that we were saying before, I think it's the world continues on whether or not, anything happens to you. If your player characters don't act, things are still going to happen. Timers are innate.
Yeah, but the timers focus on the character. How long does your torch last?
No, but not always. The timers can focus on the NPCs or events that are going to happen at a certain point in time too. The adventure that I ran, the Crumbling Keep of Kashmir, was very much written as, yes, you're exposed to this disease. Now you're going to, but if you don't solve this certain problem at a certain point, I could see, and I think it could go either
Yes.
way.
Yeah, I think there's probably more complexity to this than
I think it might be a good
I've
balance.
here.
It might be right in the middle.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
Out the box, I would say there's far more on the character side than the world side. Your adventure that you mentioned there, that brought in certain things to make it semi-world focused, but it still had to focus on the characters, giving them a disease to bring in those elements to make it far more world focused.
That's the pressure timer to get them to a
but
resolution.
Out the box, I don't think Shadow Dark is world focused. You got stuff to create dungeons and to simulate certain arenas, but it's very much the players dropped in and what happens to the players.
So if we were looking at our Foursquare thing, whereas we said OD&D was heavy DM and heavy world, this one, I think this one would kind. Well, no, I'd say it's much less DM. I'd say it's heavier, not super heavy towards character, but more towards the middle, slightly towards character on the DM.
I would agree. It's probably a little, depending.
I'm sorry, I'm messing that up. I think it's more towards the middle on player DM and more towards the middle on world character, but slightly to character. I would say so. Less extreme, I guess. This one, in these two categories, these two axes, I think it's closer to the center.
I would agree. It's up towards character, but in between player and DM.
Yeah. I agree with that. But you guys are both making good points, and this whole debate about the world and what is the world and such is interesting too. All of these topics can be delved into very deeply. But okay, so would you guys agree? I put this in the category of hybrid. Because I think it very much has, it's like it wants to appeal to old school feel, right?
Yeah.
But the rules, even though they're light, which lends towards old school, I think it's admittedly modern style, in a lot of ways. It's very uniform in what it is.
D20 advantage,
Right. Those kinds of
there's no Vancian magics. It's all roll to cast stuff like that.
That's true.
Yeah. Which that's not even. Yeah, that's definitely not even tied in the Vancian magic. It's roll to cast, and if you fail, that's when things start happening.
My comment on it's been brutal to me. I didn't roll over an 8 for like 12 rolls in my life.
Did you fail? Well, I mean, as a magic user, if you critical fail, that's bad.
I didn't critically fail, but I did fail, so I was like not casting much of anything. But so yeah, it's tough in that respect. Okay, so why don't we move, if we may, Dean, since this might be something you're interested in, and I'm interested in as well, is talk about the other category, one of the other categories, which is innovative or innovation. And that is the way I would loosely define that is a game that's kind of going outside of this clear classic to modern spectrum and looking at different things. Untold Destiny, in my opinion, I came up with this on my own. You didn't, define it for me. I think Untold Destiny is an innovative game because even though it's got a lot of these elements, obviously common in fantasy games, it is doing things differently. When you describe it as the multi D20 system, right? Is that an official title you're using for?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the big selling points of it, yeah.
Sure. And if I was to describe what that means, I I think it's accurate to say that it's like advantage expanded, right? Because whereas advantage is you're rolling 2 and you're taking the highest, and you take that to the next level where you're using even more d20s as a way of determining your odds.
Rather than it being advantage, it's simulating your expertise, your training. And so it creates a more consistent. You just mentioned there your big frustration. You're playing a spellcaster, you can't roll above an 8, and you feel useless. Whereas in our system, if you're a spellcaster and you've got trainings, let's say it's intelligence, you could be rolling 3 dice and taking the highest of those 3 dice. So as a spellcaster, all of a sudden you're that much better. If you're then playing something like a paladin, you might only have 2 dice you're rolling for wisdom and spellcasting.
Right.
So all of a sudden now you're less trained, but you're still quite competent. If you happen to not be a spellcaster, like I'm trying to think, the Dungeoneer might be casting a spell from a scroll and might only have 1 dice in intelligence, then you're only rolling 1 dice because you're not very good at spellcasting. So it's to simulate your expertise.
Yeah, and so you should watch the episode where we talked to Dean and Vicky about the details of their math. Suffice it to say, you have the math worked out in this, and one of the innovations that you have is that you have a fixed DC. Essentially, it's a 20 DC. You're always rolling versus a 20, almost always, right? Is it always or almost?
It's always, unless it's an opposed roll, in which case you've got to beat the instigator of the roll to turn it into a failure.
Right. So and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things. The math behind it is not dissimilar, meaning, the odds and things like that is not dissimilar to what you might find in a given instance of a 3-5 game or something, but you're doing it in such a way where you're taking is this a +2? Is this a +4? And all that, and streamlining the entire game system such that it plays naturally at the table, and uniformly, meaning, you're rolling 3 dice for this. And then do you want to describe how the difficulty you have?
So we use the boons and banes for difficulty adjudication, situational difficulty and stuff like that. So instead of having to come up with constantly, thinking, is this a 15? Is this a 10? Is this a 25 DC? When you're running the game, you just simply say, look, it's what you're trying to do is difficult. So you got a bane, and you know what? It's pouring down with rain. It's making it even more difficult. You got another bane. You've now got 2 banes. So you roll 2d6 with the test and take that away from your result, making it a lot more unlikely that you're going to succeed based on whether you've got a really good attribute or not, and how many dice you're rolling. The flip side is, if it's easy, you get a boon. If you're a character, so for example, the Dungeoneer, if you select one of your Dungeoneer options as being stealthy, you get a boon when you're trying to make a stealthy check. Anybody can stealth, but you now get a boon. If you're in an urban environment, you get 2 boons. So all of a sudden now you're an expert at stealthing, even if you've got 2 banes because of lighting and stuff like that. You've got a good chance of making your roll because your dexterity proficiency rating is probably going to be 3 dice. And when you get training at a later level, you might pump that up to 4 dice, the maximum it can go. So you're rolling 4d20, more chance of getting a critical success because you're that much better at doing it. And you got your boons to offset any banes that you might have. So you're a really good expert at stealthing. And that's our way of doing it. We take the maths out of it completely.
Right.
The only maths you've got is, I roll some dice, I roll some D6s, I add them and take them away, and then I add my attribute. Have I got 20 or higher, or have I beaten the person I'm up against? And it's straightforward. That mechanic underpins pretty much everything through the game.
Right, and that's so that removal of the math, that you're sitting there at the table doing all these little calculations constantly, is kind of the core of the innovation that I see as the result, meaning that that's what the players are seeing in terms of, I know that there's a lot behind it. And well, that's why I call it innovative, because the experience is different, right? You're doing the same things. It's like, we talked about, you're looking at the character sheet or whatever. And well, no, as a player, I want to be saying, hey, I'm doing this. And then the way it's resolved is streamlined and made cleaner, and to allow these other things you're trying to accomplish in the gameplay to happen without as much overhead. That's
Yeah,
my
yeah. And it applies to everything. So no matter what you're doing, even if it's an attack roll, the boon banes kick in for adjudication of difficulty. Your number ranges are pretty much the same from first level all the way up to 20th. What changes is the damage you can inflict. You get better at dealing damage. You get more tools, so more sort of horizontal growth as you go up those levels. But your proficiency and the numbers you should expect remain pretty much the same, because swinging a sword and trying to hit someone at level 1 is pretty much the same at level 20. Level 20, you might be better at dealing damage on a hit or hitting multiple opponents compared to level 1. But the difficulty remains static in that it's the same level of difficulty. The world doesn't become more difficult because you've leveled up.
Right. So, okay. I mean, we could try and run through this and say whether, but I like, for example, I don't have enough experience with your game to see, story focus and narrative and things like that
on the spectrum.
Yeah. So maybe it would be premature to do that. But
I think so. I mean, I could say, but I'm not the person who needs to say this. It's the people playing the game who need to come back and say, in our experience, this is how we feel about your game. So it would be foolhardy. I know what I'm after, but it's not me to say whether that's been achieved or not. So
right. And so having played your game a little bit, for example, if we're saying the classic or the modern, and why I started thinking this, it's not hybrid because there's other things to it. And that's why I started thinking about that category is one, your game is one of the reasons, you do healing is not like classic and it's not like 3.5, right? It's not modern. It's kind of this other system in between that allows you to keep playing where you still have permanent injuries and such, where where the other systems kind of don't, either classic or, I mean, if you have enough healing in AD&D, you're back up just the same as you are in first. It's just not as easy, right?
Yeah.
And in yours, even if you are back up in hit points, you could be carrying around a debilitating injury, right?
You absolutely could. When we interviewed Professor DM, he talked about how hit points are your timer. And they add momentum to the game. They add that, and he described hit points across the adventure. Within Untold Destiny, your hit points are for that combat encounter. So during that encounter, they're approaching 0, and it adds a lot of sort of, you're trying to make sure you don't hit 0 before your enemies do. And that's within one combat encounter, and that makes it exciting. Every combat encounter is exciting because you could be wounded during that combat encounter. You could find yourself in a bad position. The enemy could swarm you, getting a load of boons on top of their rolls. So every additional enemy you've got gives a boon to the attack of the person attacking you because you're just being swarmed. And your hit points could go from max down to 0, and now you're taking wounds. And wounds don't go away at the end of the combat. They persist until you get them healed. So, it makes every combat encounter really exciting, and you're managing that resource as it races towards 0 during the encounter.
Right. And that's another example of the innovation, right? Is that, people would say, "Oh, you heal after every combat," but that's misleading. We are in hit points, but it's not the same as just boom, I'm healed up. Because within that encounter, that level of danger and that timer that you mentioned, like Professor DM mentioned, is very active, and not just hit points, your other resources as well, your stamina and
your stamina and spell points. Yeah,
right. So all those things are, again, I don't have a ton of experience playing, but it came through very clearly when we did play it that you feel that kind of pressure, and your choices are important for everything you're doing. But you do often, if you succeed, you do often get to continue on as opposed to, well, that was our combat for the day. Now we got to rest for a week because you don't get one hit point back. So in that way, it's not classic, but that's a good thing.
I wanted to get away from that classic. Your resources have to be managed throughout the day, because I don't think it works well when everybody's in that zone. You're enjoying the adventure. You're busy getting into that dungeon. You're exploring room after room, and then suddenly from the back, you got the spellcaster going, "I'm out of spells, guys. Can we leave?" And everybody's like, "No, we're in the moment. We're in the zone. We're
right."
So you just keep going. And we found when we were doing running adventures, bits of campaigns, doing a lot of the play testing, geez, the adventuring day just felt so much more natural. And it was only when either the 8 hours were up and everybody was exhausted and needing to naturally withdraw from whatever they were doing, or someone got badly injured. And then you're kind of dragging this badly injured adventurer with you and leaving going, yeah, we've had a beating and we now have to go back and heal. And it just felt so much more natural. It also meant you didn't have to have this, which 5e falls foul of, which is to make sure it's a challenging day for the adventurers, you need X number of these encounters, X number of these encounters,
Right.
X number of these encounters, and they should only have like 2 short rests in the day and then a long rest at the end, which resets everything. And it just felt I hated it in 5e, because as you went up high levels, often you'd have that one big encounter. The
Right.
party would be preparing, they'd have one big encounter, and guaranteed all the daily stuff was blowing in that encounter. And 5e, you could burst up your damage, you could burst up what you could do, action surge alone. And if you've only got the one encounter and all those abilities are used, it makes the party go from superhero to almost invincible. It was just, and if you're trying to, I prefer lots of random stuff, but every now and then you're going to have your theater piece. You've worked through this dungeon, you've now got to the throne room, you're up against the Dark Lord himself. It's very much a theater piece. And trying to create an exciting theater piece for the players to enjoy when they've got the ability to burst way above what they could normally do, because it's that one encounter. It becomes difficult, and 5e was terrible for that, and I just wanted to get away from that.
Yeah, and it's because it's about the resource expenditure of resources. Like, you're expected to use 25% of it here, and then now 25% here, and then but if you exactly like you said, well, fine, I'll just spend 75%, and then I'm good, right? It's like.
Yeah, we expect you to have 100% of your resources at the start of a combat encounter and use them all wisely during that encounter to win.
Yeah,
and then it just all comes back, and the next encounter is the same. So every combat encounter, dare I use the words balanced? Every combat encounter, you come in knowing what you're capable of, and the whole world is balanced around that. So if you're fighting, I mean, we got a system where you could potentially take out a much higher level creature than you. And it is possible, but likelihood is 1, maybe 2 of you will die, and it will require a lot of good tactics and a bit of luck. But then I like that in a world. In 5e, if you have a low-level party and you chuck something big at them, unless the DM doesn't know what they're doing, likelihood is that creature's just going to kill the party, and that's it. They haven't got a fighting chance.
Yeah. So, because I know Cam's got to jump here in a couple of minutes.
I do.
We're pushing up against the edge here. 2 things I wanted to point out. First of all, congratulations to Professor Dungeon Master. Let me see here. I'm gonna have to hide the chat, I think. He has crossed the 1 million threshold, and actually he's at 1,060,000. So he's already done 1,010,000 more than the 50,000. So I'm very much looking forward to this coming up. I did back it at the 250 level, and as you can see, people are doing it now. And then let me see here, Dean. This is your website here, and it's got all the different stuff going on here. And right now you can get the free Untold Destiny Basic Edition first level taster rules, right?
Yeah. Everything you need to create characters at first level, including spells and equipment, and you can pretty much play the game. We got 14 creatures in there, so someone can run the game and do tasters, or demos and stuff like that. So everything for you to get your teeth into the system and to show you what the system's about and where it is going. We've got we've got everything pretty much written up. We're now adding a lot more detail to it, expanding on a few areas, which are going to change the flow slightly based on feedback we've been given. But yeah, the basic edition taster rules, if you haven't downloaded them, download them, have a read of them. Beautiful artwork in there. Just see how straightforward the system is. And if you're a DM or GM, run it for your players. Come up with a scenario. We got some great creatures in there. And see what your players think.
I can't wait to bring my Deathbringer into Untold Destiny.
Well, do you know what? The beautiful thing, and we've talked about Shadow Dark systems, and I know Professor DM, we're interviewing him tomorrow. We're going to go into a lot more depth and detail on the system itself. But he talked about how this is grim dark. And, if you like your grim dark settings, we designed Untold Destiny to be flexible in that regard. So if you want to run a grimdark, you can make it grimdark. If you want to run a more fantasy, sort of hero fantasy, you can do it. One thing we definitely are not is superhero fantasy. We do not have the stupid spells and stupid stuff like that in there to make your heroes, be able to destroy worlds at higher levels. Perfectly playable from 1st to 20th.
So Cam, what's coming up on Sci-Fi Snob tonight on the Top Lofty Lounge?
1 minute ago, we started the show. We are going to be discussing Project Hail Mary, which was a recent film, which I finally saw this week. So I
haven't seen it yet. I was gonna watch it, but they wanted money for that, and I'm like,
It's on Prime, so if you subscribe to Prime, you can get it from there. But Vicky and I watched it, absolutely loved it. It was good.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, there's a bunch of other systems I think that we still, I gotta.
I think we can continue this discussion easily at another point when maybe Dean's not so busy.
So maybe in a month.
In a month would be good. Yeah.
We could probably refine things a little bit in between now and then. And,
we'll work in the back screen. If anybody has any ideas, you have been seeing there's a invitation in popping up in the chat to join the Bad News Bards Discord. If anybody is interested in that, we'd love to have you guys.
I think we can design a load of quad charts and start.
I think that's going to come. We know how much Cam likes his Venn diagrams, so I'm sure there'll be a few of those too.
Yeah.
But with that said, the only other thing I wanted to bring up real quickly, and Cam, if you need to dash, go ahead. We did get Go ahead.
Sorry, I am. Thanks, Dean. Always great having you on, and I'll talk to you guys later.
All right, take care. And other than that, I would say that we did get a couple of people that have already received their stuff from the episode 1776. So if you haven't got it, a lot of stuff is supposed to be delivered tomorrow. And if you haven't heard from me, there is one person. Obi-Wan on meds. I need to hear from you, man. I need an email. I saw a message on the stream or as a comment on the stream asking. I did not get the email from you. I believe everybody else everything else has been shipped off. But Obi-Wan won a copy of Crom from the Dungeon Delver, who actually is streaming right now too, so we probably lost some people to him, but because he's got Ed Greenwood on and Alan Hammock. By the way, speaking of which, next week we have Alan Hammock. So he scooped me, but only because they're both up at EggCon. So, but at any rate, Dean, it's a pleasure as always. You're always welcome on the show. That's why you're in the credits.
Yeah.
So,
I thought I'd better appear and pay my dues, as it were. It's been a few months since I've been on the show, so I think I've made 2 in a row now, and I've loved it. It's been fantastic. You got a great show here.
Well, we try, and we love having everybody that we can come on, when they can. So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and roll the credits because there's other stuff. And Dean, are you going to go to bed now? It's 4 a.m.
Yeah, it's 4 a.m. I've got one hell of a busy day today. I got people coming over the house. We got blinds being measured. I got my hair being cut and stuff like that. So I got to head back to bed.
All right. Well, you take it easy. Good seeing you again. And when are we going to see you next on the Wednesday show?
So I'm not on this Wednesday. It's a week Wednesday. In fact, I'm with the Eclectic Goat this Wednesday. And I think we're alongside Professor DM again, talking about the Critical Role effect.
Ooh, now that's fun. I need to check them out because I'm not familiar with the Eclectic Goat. So
she's lovely. She's a lovely person. They have goats.
They're not in Tennessee, are they?
No idea.
Okay.
Not sure, but they've just gone through birthing, so there were some lovely photos.
Well, because of the goat thing, I know somebody who's into into some Lego stuff and and other sci-fi fantasy stuff. So that's why I'm like, But any rate, all right. Well, Dean, I'm going to roll the credits. I appreciate you very much. It's up to you if you want to stick around for a brief minute after, but I'm going to roll the credits. Let's
Okay.
see.
And thanks very much. Take care.
Take care, everybody.